All right, question time. What is the one method of pain control that I've used with a ton of patients and no one has ever told me to stop doing it? See if you can guess before I get back. Number one answer, counter pressure. But if you've been following along, you probably already knew that because I did that video all about unmedicated childbirth, right? And in it, you specifically asked me for a video all about counter pressure. So here I am to deliver quite literally, because counter pressure, like I said, everyone I use it on is like, that feels so good, or please don't stop. I have never had anybody say to me, ugh, I hate that, get your hands off of me. And I did a poll for you guys, and you seem to agree that counter pressure is really effective at managing pain during childbirth. I mean, there are some of you that of course didn't like it, but that's okay because everyone's different. But I find for a whole, it is generally a really effective tool to have in your childbirth toolbox. My name is Tina B. I am a labor and delivery nurse, so I've used this quite a few times, and I do have my specialization in perinatal nursing. If this type of content interests you, please boop that subscribe button because I sure do love having you here learning with me. Counter pressure is also really cool because it can be used on somebody who's going through childbirth unmedicated in all sorts of different positions, but it can also be used on somebody with an epidural. And you're thinking, Tina, if they have an epidural, aren't they not feeling any pain? And that is not always the case because there is a period of time when you request your epidural before you get it. Sometimes there can be a delay. So counter pressure can be really effective at getting you from the point of asking for an epidural to getting your epidural. But also, not all epidurals are going to make you magically pain-free. A lot of the times you might have some breakthrough pain as you're getting through to transition and pushing, or you're going to be feeling that pressure of childbirth. So counter pressure can be used here as well. And I am going to go over a bunch of different techniques that you can use for different parts of your labor experience, and of course explain to you how to use them. So the terms counter pressure, they get tossed around all the time, right? But what is counter pressure? Essentially, this is a strong, steady downward force on the back side of the pelvis, either in the middle, down low by the sacrum here, or on both sides at the hips. And when you do this, essentially you are decreasing the sensation of pain that you feel during a contraction because we apply counter pressure during contractions. And it is really effective for anybody who's experiencing a ton of back pain in their labor. So if your baby happens to be facing the wrong way or facing the sky instead of facing the ground, then this is going to be a really effective technique for you to utilize to get through that labor pain. And that's not to say that if you have back labor, your baby is definitely facing the sky or sunny side up. It's just to say that counter pressure is so good for back labor. The other thing that counter pressure is going to do is it's going to loosen up those ligaments of the pelvis. And when you loosen up the ligaments and you get that pelvic floor to relax a little bit, that's also going to decrease the amount of pain that you're feeling during your contractions. And counter pressure also works by distraction as well, because you have somebody touching you during a contraction. It can actually take your attention away from the contraction and put your attention on that pressure on your pelvis. And likely also there's some gate control working in there. It's sort of the same idea as when you squeeze a comb into your hand, but basically you are taking less painful stimuli, the counter pressure, and you are flooding your brain with that instead of flooding your brain with the more painful stimuli of the contraction. But I mean, I digress. Let's just talk about how to do counter pressure. There's sort of two main schools of teaching on counter pressure. One is that pressure right in the middle down by the sacrum, and the other one is on both sides at the hips, right? But I am actually going to give you counter pressure techniques to use in earlier labor, in more active labor, also in transition, and then at the end of the video, I'm actually going to give you a counter pressure technique that you can use during pushing. But let's first talk about this sacral pressure, because that's generally what you're going to want to utilize and what's going to feel the best when you are in earlier stages of labor. You're thinking to yourself, Tina, why would I want to use sacral counter pressure in early labor? Because I've heard so much about the double hip squeeze type counter pressure, right? It's because in early labor, your baby, who of course is tucked right behind a pillow conveniently, they're generally up here in your pelvis. They are not well engaged. They are not coming through your pelvic outlet like this, ready to be born. You're in early labor. So to accommodate them engaging and coming down into the pelvis, what we want to make wider is this top part of the pelvis. And when you apply pressure down to the sacrum, you're going to notice that that top part of the pelvis, it gets wider. And no, it is not usually this dramatic in the wild, but you do have hormones circulating like relaxin that does let your pelvis move quite well in pregnancy. So let's accommodate that and encourage that by opening the top part of the pelvis. The basics to sacral counter pressure, they are really simple. You are going to find this triangular shaped bone right here. This is the sacrum. sacrum, it's kind of going to be what you sit on top of when you're sitting cross-legged. And then you are going to put down one hand, you're going to put down a second hand, and then you are going to apply strong, steady downward pressure from directly above the person that you're applying counter pressure to. You're going to apply this while they're having a contraction, and then you are going to release when the contraction is all done. You can also do this with a ball, a tennis ball, a lacrosse ball, a kid's ball, anything that is a firm ball, and you place the ball down over the sacrum and you push down on the ball during the contraction, and when the contraction goes away, you let up pressure. The really cool thing about sacral counter pressure is that if you're laboring at home and you happen to be by yourself, you can actually do this on your own by placing the ball up against the wall, lining the ball up on your sacrum, and then pushing back against the wall to apply that pressure to your sacrum with the ball. Now, as your labor progresses and baby engages even lower into your pelvis, you're probably going to notice that sacral counter pressure, it doesn't feel nearly as amazing. And that is because we now want to start to open up the lower part of your pelvis to accommodate baby engaging even deeper. And to do this, we need to squeeze on both sides of the hips, because when you squeeze inwards, you're going to notice that that lower part of the pelvis, or the pelvic outlet, it gets wider. And again, it is not this dramatic in the wild, but your pelvis will move, so we can try to help it by applying pressure on both sides with a double hip squeeze counter pressure. To do this, you are going to put the heel of your palm just above this bony part of the pelvis. This is actually where your leg bone attaches. You pop your heel down on both sides, and then you can rest the rest of your hand just down on their lower back. And then with contractions, you are going to squeeze inwards. You are going to hold for the entirety of the contraction, and then you are going to let go. You can also keep the heels of your hands there, and you can wrap the rest of your hand around their hips this way and squeeze inwards this way. Now, just a word about this. This is very, very fatiguing for the support person or the doula that is doing counter pressure. So it's a great idea to have more than one person aware of how to do counter pressure, or we can utilize some tools like a scarf. When you're using a scarf to help with counter pressure, have the person that you're doing it on be in front of you, either all fours or kneeling or standing, and then you're going to find either a scarf or a bed sheet that is long enough to go around them, but also long enough to still give you the ties at the back that you need to assist in the counter pressure. You place the scarf or the sheet around their hips. It's kind of going to go across the middle of their bum, and then at the back you cross them over so that you can apply that torque and that tension. When they have a contraction, you pull the ends away from each other to apply that tension to their hips, and then when the contraction goes away, you can release the tension. This is a great way to combat fatigue for the support person. You can also change up the technique that you use for a double hip squeeze counter pressure. Instead of using the palms of your hands, you can use your thumbs, or you can use your fists. This is going to give a little bit more targeted pressure. But I'm going to tell you this, communication is key with counter pressure, because sometimes maybe you're in just not quite the right spot, or maybe the pressure is a little bit too much or not enough. So communicate with your partner as you do these things during labor so that you can get these techniques and what they prefer just right. All right, I told you that there is a counter pressure technique that you can utilize during transition, but big disclaimer here, guys, this is only if the person giving birth will allow you to touch them during transition. Because if you remember from this other video that I made, transition is that part in the first stage of labor that is the most intense. It's the shortest, but it is also the most painful. So there's a big probability here that they are not going to want you to touch them while they are going through transition contractions. But if they do want you to touch them and they are in any sort of a sitting position, either on the bed or on a birthing chair or on the toilet, you know that I love a toilet for a laboring person. Here's what you're going to do. While they have a contraction, you place your hands on both of their knees, and then you push gently back towards their pelvis, and you hold that for the entirety of the contraction, and then you let go. And the reason that this works for transitional pain is their pelvic ligaments, they are on fire, right? They are super tense and super taut, and when you push back on their knees, what you do is you help them to relax and soften those pelvic ligaments, which is going to help them greatly with the pain of contraction. So give that one a try. You made it through early labor, you made it through active labor, you made it through transition, and now you're going to push your baby out, and I am not done. I have counter pressure for that as well. Most commonly this is done if you are pushing in an all fours position, but it can also be done if you are pushing in a lithotomy position or flat on your back, and I'm going to get into that in just a little bit. Now, the person that's pushing is generally in front of the person that's applying the counter pressure, and when they have a contraction and they are going to start pushing their baby down and out, you are going to take your two fists or your two thumbs if they want more intense pressure, but commonly only it's your fists, and you are going to put them right on their sits bones on both sides, which are like those bony prominences that are in the meat of your bum. You know what I'm talking about. You're going to take your fists and you're going to put them there, and then you are going to push forward as they start to push their baby out, because you're going to find if you're pushing in all fours, very naturally, you are going to come back on your legs as you are pushing your baby down and out, and having those two fists there applying pressure, it makes it have something that you are pushing into, and it's going to give you that counter pressure. If you are in lithotomy position, it is very much the same principle. As you are pushing baby down, the person's going to have their fists down on your sits bones, and it's going to give you sort of a target to push towards without the person needing to put their fingers in and say, push my fingers out. So it's a little bit less invasive while still giving you something to push towards. So now I gotta know, are you planning on using counter pressure in your upcoming birth, or did you use counter pressure and did you love it or did you hate it? Here's that video talking about all the different things you can utilize for an unmedicated childbirth, and I look forward to seeing you in the next video. Bye.